Friday, November 28th, 2025. Manhattan, SDNY Courthouse. Just 12 days ago, Sean Diddy Combs had been sentenced to 50 months in prison. Many thought the saga was over, that the public spectacle had finally ended. They were wrong. Today, the courtroom doors opened once again, and this time, what was about to unfold would stun the world. Outside, chaos reigned. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashed relentlessly, and helicopters circled over the Manhattan skyline. Crowds surged behind barricades, some chanting "Free Diddy," while others waved signs demanding justice for Cassie. The tension was palpable, electric. Every journalist, every officer, every spectator could feel it in the air. Before we move on, I need to be completely honest with you. Every time I check the stats, my heart drops, because almost 99% of you watch these videos, but never subscribe. Your one click truly makes a huge difference. It pushes stories like this into the spotlight so more people can see what's really happening. So please take a moment to subscribe. It means more than you know. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing your locations. It reminds me that no matter how far apart we are, these stories still connect us. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was suffocating. Diddy sat at the defense table, his once confident posture now rigid, his eyes scanning the courtroom nervously. Gone was the swagger, replaced by an unmistakable fear. His lawyer leaned close, whispering frantically, but Diddy barely registered the words. He was focused on one thing, the woman who had shattered his carefully constructed image. Cassie entered the courtroom, escorted by federal marshals and her attorney. She didn't glance toward Diddy, didn't show even the slightest hesitation. When she took the stand, raised her hand, and swore to tell the truth, Diddy's face betrayed him. Panic, pure and unmasked. For years, she began, her voice steady but burning with emotion. I stayed silent. I was controlled. I was scared. But I am not scared anymore. The courtroom froze. Every eye was fixed on her, every breath drawn tight with anticipation. Her legal team produced a brown envelope and slid it toward the clerk. Inside were the images, stills and screenshots from what they called the truth tape, moments Diddy thought were long buried. Hidden CCTV footage from luxury hotel suites, time-stamped and verified, exposing a side of him no one had dared speak of publicly. Gasps rippled through the room. Even seasoned journalists, accustomed to high-profile trials, exchanged incredulous glances. Diddy turned away, jaw tight, trying in vain to shield himself from the evidence. Cassie's voice cut through the tension. He made those nights seem glamorous, she said, eyes locked on him. But behind the lights and music, it was abuse, control, fear, and it was real. Objections came immediately from Diddy's attorney, claiming the evidence was prejudicial. The judge's gavel fell with authority. Sit down, Mr. Agnifilo. The evidence will be reviewed in full. For the first time, Diddy's armor cracked. His lawyer's protest didn't land. His supporters outside were silent, powerless, as the world watched a reckoning unfold that no amount of money or fame could prevent. Cassie continued, turning to the jury, her eyes glistening but unbroken. He thought money would protect him. But money can't buy the truth. The courtroom lights seemed to dim, shadows stretching across every face. Diddy's eyes darted between Cassie, the judge, and the massive screen displaying the evidence. Each frame, each frozen moment, told a story that needed no words. Stories of fear, silence, and abuse that could no longer be ignored. The first clip played, a grainy, time-stamped recording of a Miami hotel suite. Diddy laughed, surrounded by associates, the scene deceptively normal. And then, in the corner, Cassie appeared, visibly frightened, hesitant, searching for a way out. The room fell silent. It was no longer about celebrity scandal. It was about human truth unfolding in real time. Her attorney narrated the footage with precision, framing every motion, every expression. This is not rumor. This is evidence. Diddy's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. He scanned the courtroom, seeking allies, but even familiar faces turned away. Cassie watched the footage quietly, tears threatening but held at bay. She was not there for revenge. She was reclaiming her voice. When the clip ended, she looked directly at him. You told me no one would believe me. You told me power would protect you. Look where it has brought you now. The courtroom exhaled collectively. Outside, the crowd had grown, phones raised, streaming every moment live. News tickers flashed across screens. Cassie's evidence shocks SDNY court. Diddy faces possible life sentence. And for the first time in years, Diddy was no longer in control of his story. The tide had turned. The courtroom clock ticked past noon, but no one moved. Every eye stayed locked on Cassie as her legal team prepared the next set of evidence. Documents, photos, and witness statements corroborating her story. Each testimony aligned perfectly with her narrative, detailing the same patterns of manipulation, coercion, and fear. The judge nodded gravely. Proceed. Cassie took a deep breath. I didn't bring this for fame. I brought it for truth, for accountability. For years, I watched powerful men escape justice. Today, it ends. Diddy's blank stare betrayed him. He no longer had the luxury of denial. The courtroom wasn't just witnessing a trial. It was witnessing history being written in real time. The courtroom fell into a heavy, anticipatory silence as the prosecution prepared to present the next segment of the hotel CCTV footage. Every eye was fixed on the monitor. Even seasoned jurors leaned forward instinctively, sensing that what they were about to witness would redefine the trial. The first clip showed Diddy in a luxurious hotel suite, his usual charm in full display, laughing, joking, pretending everything was normal. But the camera angle shifted subtly, and there she was, Cassie, hesitant, fearful, shrinking into the shadows. The contrast was jarring. The facade of wealth and fame versus the truth of fear and manipulation. Cassie's voice cut through the tension, calm but charged. He made it seem like I was choosing to be there, but I wasn't. I couldn't leave. The footage continued. Each clip revealed more. Moments of subtle coercion, whispered threats, and forced compliance. Every time Diddy appeared confident, laughing, in control, the camera captured the silent terror in Cassie's eyes. The audience in the courtroom shifted uneasily in their seats. This was more than scandal. It was undeniable proof of abuse of power. A hush fell as the prosecution played audio from the same night, extracted from the hotel's surveillance system. The recordings weren't sensationalized. They were raw, unedited. Cassie's whispered protests, Diddy's dismissive responses. The camera captured every nuance, hesitation, fear, intimidation. For the first time, the jury could see, hear, and feel what Cassie had endured. Diddy's hands clenched tightly on the table. His lawyer whispered frantically, attempting to challenge the evidence's authenticity. But the judge's gavel silenced him immediately. Mr. Agnafilo, the court has verified the source of this evidence. The objection is overruled. Cassie didn't waver. She turned to face Diddy directly, her voice steady. You thought these walls would hide you, that your fame would shield you. You were wrong. Every moment captured here tells the truth you tried to bury. Even the press outside sensed the weight of the evidence. Helicopter cameras hovered above the courthouse, live streaming reactions from the growing crowd. Protesters shouted, some in disbelief, others in jubilation. Social media exploded. Clips of the CCTV footage were shared endlessly. Hashtags trending within minutes. Hashtag Cassie Truth, hashtag Diddy Exposed, Justice Served. The prosecution began cross-referencing the footage with witness statements and messages. Each text, email, and voice recording painted a consistent, irrefutable picture. Diddy's behavior wasn't isolated. It was habitual, deliberate, and designed to intimidate. Every move, every word corroborated the chilling images on the screen. Cassie remained composed, though inside her heart pounded. Years of fear, years of suppression had culminated in this courtroom moment. For the first time, she wasn't pleading or negotiating. She was claiming her truth, fully, unapologetically. Diddy's face had drained of color. The confident, untouchable mogul the world knew was gone. All that remained was a man confronted with the stark reality of his actions. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward his attorney, as if begging for some escape from the avalanche of evidence. But there was none. The prosecution paused, letting the gravity of the footage settle over the courtroom. The silence was almost unbearable. Even the jurors seemed frozen, the weight of truth pressing down on every shoulder. Then the final clip was cued, the one moment that would cement the severity of Diddy's actions. The camera captured him trying to coerce compliance, a moment of undeniable intimidation. Cassie flinched as it played, but she held her ground. This was the evidence that would tip the balance. What had been whispered in corners, hidden in shadows, was now undeniable. A collective intake of breath echoed through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras outside captured reactions that ranged from stunned shock to triumphant relief. Even the judge's expression betrayed a flicker of disbelief at the clarity and horror of the footage. When the screen went dark, Cassie's attorney stood, voice calm but resolute. "Your Honor, this footage, combined with testimony and documentation, proves a pattern of coercion, intimidation, and abuse. This is not just about one night or one incident. It is a clear pattern of unlawful behavior by Mr. Comey." Diddy's lawyer rose once more, his voice wavering. "Your Honor, we request that the court consider context. My client's actions have been misrepresented." The gavel hit sharply. "The court has heard enough. Sit down." Outside, the city buzzed. Helicopters circled. Social media erupted. But inside the courtroom, the focus was singular. Cassie Ventura reclaiming her story, and Diddy Comey's confronted with the unyielding truth. And as the room held its collective breath, everyone knew one thing. The sentencing that followed would not just be a consequence, it would be a historic reckoning. The tension in SDNY was now almost unbearable. Every eye in the room was locked on the defense table where Diddy sat rigid, jaw tight, fingers drumming against the polished wood. The hotel CCTV footage had done what words alone could not. It stripped him of his aura, revealing the man behind the empire, fragile, exposed, and cornered. Cassie's eyes remained steady on him. There was no gloating, no malice, only the quiet, unyielding resolve of someone who had survived fear and now demanded acknowledgement. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence alone, unwavering, conveyed the depth of years spent silenced and the weight of finally being heard. The prosecution rose, pacing slowly, deliberate. Every word was calculated, every glance toward the jury a reminder. This was not a story of fame nor fortune. It was a story of accountability. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the lead attorney began, voice low but resonant, "you have seen the footage. You have heard the recordings. You have read the testimony. The evidence is clear. This was not a misunderstanding nor a fleeting mistake. It was an orchestrated, calculated pattern of intimidation, manipulation, and abuse of power." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. The courtroom was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning. "For years," he continued, "Mr. Comey's used his fame as a shield. He cultivated loyalty, obedience, and fear. But fame cannot erase the truth. It cannot protect someone from justice. What you have witnessed today is not the behavior of a man wronged by circumstance. It is the behavior of a man who believed he was untouchable." Diddy's head sank into his hands. His once confident posture now seemed fragile, almost childlike in its defeat. His attorney whispered frantically, trying to interject, but the judge's sharp hand silenced him. "Mr. Agnafilo, no more interruptions." The jury scribbled notes furiously. The camera feeds from outside showed crowds swelling with anticipation, supporters of Cassie chanting for justice, some in tears, others shouting in disbelief at the downfall of a music icon. Social media had already exploded. Clips of the footage were trending worldwide, every moment dissected, every reaction magnified. Then came the moments that would be etched in history. Witnesses who had once feared the retaliation now spoke freely, corroborating every detail captured on the CCTV footage. Their voices were steady, determined, echoing a truth that fame and fortune had long tried to bury. Cassie's attorney stood again, voice rising over the growing murmur. "Your Honor, this is not merely a case of misconduct. This is a clear violation of law, trust, and humanity. The defendant's actions have caused lasting harm, fear, and trauma. Justice requires more than a mere sentence. It requires acknowledgement of the full scope of these crimes. Diddy's lawyer tried one last desperate appeal. Consider the charitable work, the decades of contributions, the mental strain he has faced. The gavel came down sharply. Enough. For a heartbeat, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the prosecution's side, a hush fell over as the final damning piece of evidence was revealed. A new video from the hotel's hidden camera, one that showed Diddy in a moment of coercion so stark, so undeniable, that even his legal team fell silent. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even seasoned reporters, accustomed to scandals and celebrity trials, exchanged glances of disbelief. This footage was the linchpin, the moment where reputation collided violently with reality. Cassie's expression remained composed. She felt a surge of relief, yes, but more than that, a sense of vindication for everyone who had been silenced before her. Her hands rested calmly on the table as she listened to the footage, her eyes never leaving Diddy. Diddy, in contrast, seemed to shrink into himself. His composure, which had been a carefully curated shield for decades, shattered in seconds. He looked around desperately as if searching for an escape route, but there was none. The walls of the courtroom closed in, mirrored in the cold, unblinking eyes of the judge, the jury, and the world watching. The prosecution turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the pattern is clear. The behavior is deliberate. The evidence undeniable. We urge the court to consider the full gravity of the defendant's actions in delivering a sentence that reflects the severity of these crimes." The judge leaned forward, eyes locked on Diddy. "Mr. Commies, the court has seen and heard everything. The time for debate is over." Diddy's lips trembled. Under his breath, barely audible, he muttered, this can't be happening." But it was happening. And in that moment, the courtroom, the jury, the press, and the watching world all knew nothing would ever be the same. The courtroom fell into a tense silence. Every person present, from the jurors to the reporters scribbling furiously, felt the air thicken. The hotel CCTV footage had stripped Diddy of his last veneer of power. What remained was a man confronted with the consequences of decades spent believing he was untouchable. Judge Subramanian adjusted his glasses, fingers resting on the bench, eyes scanning the courtroom. The pause before speaking was deliberate, almost ceremonial, and in that silence, the weight of history pressed down on everyone. "Mr. Commies," he began, his voice low, measured, and coldly precise. "This court has thoroughly reviewed all evidence, testimonies, and the new video submitted by the prosecution. The gravity of your actions is beyond question. For years, you have exercised influence to manipulate, intimidate, and silence those who sought only truth and safety. Fame and fortune do not grant immunity from accountability." Diddy's hands trembled in his lap. His lawyer leaned closer, whispering rapidly, but the words seemed to dissolve in the suffocating weight of the room. The judge continued, each word falling like a hammer. "The court finds that the previous sentence of 50 months in federal prison does not reflect the seriousness of these offenses. Considering the pattern of abuse, the deliberate actions captured on the hotel CCTV footage, and the enduring trauma inflicted upon the victims, the court hereby increases your sentence." Every eye widened. The murmur that had been creeping along the edges of the room surged into a gasp. Reporters froze mid-note, pens hovering. The jurors stiffened, the gravity of the moment etched into their faces. "For coercion, assault, and the sustained abuse of power," the judge declared, voice now resonant and unwavering, "the court sentences you, Sean Commies, to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The sound of the gavel hitting the bench was deafening in its finality. It echoed like a judgment not just of law, but of history itself. Cassie's hands trembled slightly as tears threatened to spill, but she steadied herself. The weight she had carried for years, the fear, the silences, the threats, now began to lift, replaced by the quiet relief of justice served. Her attorney leaned in, whispering softly, "It's over. You did it." Diddy's reaction was instantaneous and visceral. His face crumpled, composure shattered completely. He slumped forward, elbows on knees, hands gripping his head, as if trying to physically hold on to some fragment of the life he had known. The man who had once commanded arenas and stages now appeared small, almost childlike, lost within the walls of the courtroom that now held him accountable. Outside, chaos erupted. Sirens wailed, crowds roared, and reporters shouted over one another to capture the historic moment. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended worldwide. News outlets broadcast live. And every corner of Manhattan seemed to pulse with the shockwaves of the verdict. Hashtag Cassie wins. Diddy life sentence. Hash justice in SDNY. Inside the courtroom, the tension was punctuated by the mechanical click of handcuffs. U.S. Marshals moved forward, their expressions professional but deliberate. Diddy was escorted from the defense table, head bowed, his once immaculate suit now creased and undone. He turned briefly, a fleeting glance toward Cassie, the same woman whose courage had toppled his empire. Their eyes met, and for a single heartbeat, the courtroom seemed to still. There was no triumph in her gaze, no vindictive satisfaction, only the calm weight of truth, witnessed and validated. As Diddy was led out, Cassie stepped forward. Reporters surged toward her, microphones thrust into her face. The questions came fast, urgent. Do you feel vindicated? What message do you have for survivors? Cassie paused, collecting herself. Her voice was soft but carried a cutting clarity. This was never about revenge. It was always about truth. And truth cannot be silenced forever. She turned, walking down the courthouse steps, disappearing into the storm of flashing cameras and shouting crowds. Meanwhile, Diddy, enclosed in the black van outside, sat in silence. The city that had once echoed with his music now resonated with a very different sound, the sound of accountability. The empire had fallen, the legend had ended, and for the first time, justice did not whisper. It roared. The streets of Manhattan were a storm of sound and motion. Cameras flashed relentlessly, microphones jutted into the air, and shouting voices collided in a chorus of disbelief, elation, and outrage. Protesters and supporters alike surged through the sidewalks, their banners fluttering wildly. Justice for Cassie. No one is above the law. Life sentence for Diddy. News vans honked as reporters attempted to cut through the sea of humanity. Social media exploded in real time. Every phone became a broadcast tool, capturing the shock and awe that rippled through the city. By the hour, the hashtag Cassie Stands Tall was trending worldwide. Millions watched live streams, debating, celebrating, condemning, and replaying the courtroom footage that had changed everything. Inside SDNY, the atmosphere was different, almost serene in its intensity. Cassie sat with her attorney, shoulders straight, hands resting lightly on her lap. She observed the controlled chaos outside through the large courthouse windows. Every flash of a camera, every distant cheer, reminded her of the cost she had paid to get here. Years of silenced screams, whispered threats, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. Her attorney leaned close. People need to hear from you. You've given them hope, courage, but only if you speak. Cassie nodded, her voice calm, measured, as she addressed the press waiting outside. This is about more than one person, one name, or one empire. This is about accountability, about the truth finally being seen and heard. If my story helps just one person find their voice, then it's worth every fear I've ever faced. Back in the courtroom, Diddy sat in the holding area, hands cuffed, head down. The reality of life imprisonment had settled over him like a heavy, inescapable fog. His empire, once untouchable, was now a ghost of memory. The luxury cars, sold-out tours, and golden accolades that once defined him were meaningless behind steel bars. The hotel CCTV footage, which had sent shockwaves through the courtroom, now dominated news cycles. Analysts replayed it endlessly, dissecting every movement, every glance, every word. Experts weighed in on the meticulous planning Diddy had used to intimidate his victims, and the public collectively recoiled. The visual evidence had turned whispers into undeniable proof that even the most untouchable could fall. Meanwhile, inside Cassie's inner circle, celebrations were muted but heartfelt. Her family, friends, and legal teams shared quiet embraces. There were tears of relief, smiles that barely held back years of pain, and moments of stillness where no one spoke, only exhaled. Justice had been delivered, but the weight of the journey lingered. In the distance, the sound of sirens began to fade, replaced by murmurs of the crowd slowly dispersing. Television reporters narrated the aftermath, emphasizing the global implications. A life sentence for one of the world's most famous figures, proof that no one, no matter how powerful, is immune. Cassie finally stepped away from the cameras, heading toward the waiting car. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool October air against her skin. Each step she took symbolized more than freedom. It was the reclamation of her life, her voice, and her dignity. Meanwhile, Diddy's van disappeared into traffic, a moving coffin for the empire that had once ruled music, media, and influence. Inside, he stared blankly ahead, his mind replaying moments that once brought him power. Now nothing but echoes of regret and lost control. As evening settled over Manhattan, the city lights flickered on, illuminating the streets where history had been made. Conversations on sidewalks and in apartments, offices, and cafes replayed the verdict. Some mourned the fall of an icon. Others celebrated the victory of courage and resilience. The world had watched a titan crumble, and in that crumbling, a voice, Cassie's, had risen above it all. But the story didn't end there. Justice had been served, yet the ripples of this case would spread far beyond the courtroom. Survivors everywhere found hope in her triumph. Power brokers whispered nervously about accountability. And somewhere in the quiet shadows, Diddy's mind churned with what-ifs, lost opportunities, and a life forever confined. In this city, where empires were built and broken in the blink of an eye, one truth remained unshakable. Courage could topple even the mightiest of men. The sun had dipped low over Manhattan, casting long shadows across streets still buzzing from the verdict. News helicopters hovered like vultures, circling the courthouse, capturing every angle of the dispersing crowd. Social media erupted with analysis, speculation, and celebration. Every tweet, every post, every live stream carried one unrelenting truth. The sentence had shattered the illusion of invincibility surrounding Diddy. Inside the courthouse, the courtroom now emptied, leaving only the echoes of gavels and whispered conversations. Cassie lingered a moment longer, standing near the steps where she had once felt the weight of fear pressing down on her. Her attorney approached, a small smile breaking through the exhaustion. "You did it. You faced the impossible and won. People will remember today." Cassie exhaled, letting the gravity of it all sink in. The courage that had been forged in the crucible of her suffering was no longer theoretical. It had transformed into a tangible victory. She felt a strange mixture of relief and fatigue, the kind that comes after surviving a storm that feels like it could swallow you whole. Meanwhile, in the heavily secured van, Diddy sat silently. The reinforced glass offered no protection from the reality pressing against him. Every flashbulb, every honk, every news ticker outside was a reminder that the world had moved on, and he was left behind. His empire, his influence, his carefully curated persona, all of it had dissolved in the courtroom's harsh light. Inside MDC Brooklyn, preparations were underway for his arrival. Guards whispered among themselves, checking protocols, ensuring the man who had once seemed untouchable would be treated like any other inmate. In a private corridor, Diddy's hands trembled as they adjusted the cuffs for transfer. He barely registered the murmured instructions of the officers. His mind was consumed with what he had lost, what he could never reclaim. The hotel's CCTV footage, which had ignited the chain of events leading to the life sentence, became the focal point of discussions across the city. Analysts debated the precision of its capture, while ordinary viewers were shocked anew at the magnitude of the evidence. It wasn't just a video, it was the ultimate instrument of accountability. Every replay reinforced the reality that actions had consequences, no matter one's fame or wealth. Back on the streets, reporters tracked Cassie's movements, capturing her departure, her pauses to answer a few questions, and the steady, purposeful stride that had become her signature. "This isn't about revenge," she repeated to one persistent reporter. "It's about ensuring truth and justice exist, even when people in power try to bury them. Survivors, if you hear me, your voice matters." In quiet moments that followed, Cassie returned to her hotel, removed her shoes, and let the tension leave her body in a single long sigh. The weight of years, months, and days spent preparing, testifying, and reliving trauma pressed against her chest, and she felt both exhausted and exultant. Her victory wasn't just legal, it was profoundly personal. For Diddy, the story was entirely different. In the stark quarters of the MDC, he walked with a hollow rhythm, officers flanking him as he processed a reality without escape. The mansion-lined avenues, the flashing cameras, the applause of stadiums, all replaced by concrete walls, metal doors, and the steady hum of fluorescent lights. He was a king dethroned, a celebrity stripped to his bare essence, forced to confront himself without the trappings of fame. In the media frenzy, every outlet attempted to predict the aftermath, potential appeals, public responses, and the effect on the music industry. Social media became a forum for outrage, celebration, and reflection. Memes circulated, news segments debated, and everywhere, the question lingered, can power ever be fully restrained? And yet, through all the chaos, a single truth remained unshakable. Courage, evidence, and perseverance had toppled the mighty. Cassie had become a symbol, a living testament to resilience in the pursuit of justice. Her steps forward were not just her own, they belonged to every silenced voice that had waited decades to be heard. Even as night fell and the city lights flickered against the dark skyline, the story continued to unfold. Manhattan had witnessed the end of an empire, but it had also witnessed the rise of something more enduring, the triumph of truth. In the quiet of her hotel room, Cassie sat by the window, watching the city pulse beneath her. Somewhere out there, Diddy was beginning his first night behind bars, grappling with the permanence of his downfall. Somewhere else, the world was talking, sharing, and learning from what had happened. And for Cassie, the night brought a rare and profound peace, the kind that comes from knowing that the impossible had been achieved. The morning after the sentence, Manhattan felt different. Even the usual clamor of taxis, delivery trucks, and city chatter seemed muted, as if the streets themselves were processing what had just transpired. Newsstands were plastered with headlines in bold letters, "Diddy sentenced to life. Truth prevails." Every front page told the same story, but the subtext resonated deeper. No one, no matter how famous or feared, was beyond accountability. Cassie walked through a quiet park, the early sunlight catching on the glistening autumn leaves. People paused to glance at her, some with recognition, others simply sensing the aura of someone who had endured the impossible and emerged triumphant. She had become a symbol, not just for survivors, but for courage itself, the personification of truth that refused to be buried. In interviews that streamed across networks, Cassie spoke with deliberate calm. "Justice is not about punishment alone," she said. "It's about acknowledgement, about creating a world where silence can no longer protect the guilty. Survivors, take heart. Your voice, your courage matters." Every word was precise, every pause intentional. She didn't speak for fame or attention. She spoke to heal, to remind, to inspire. Meanwhile, inside MDC Brooklyn, Diddy sat in the small confines of his cell. The walls were gray, the lights harsh, the hours stretching endlessly before him. For the first time, he faced a reflection not in mirrors or cameras, but in silence. The empire that had seemed untouchable, the influence that had silenced so many, the persona that had commanded stages and headlines, all stripped away. What remained was only himself, and the echo of every act that had led him here. Guards moved silently, noting his compliance but also the tension coiled in his posture. Even as he tried to plan, to strategize, to appeal, the finality of the life sentence pressed against him like iron chains. He could no longer charm, manipulate, or redirect attention. The world outside continued to turn, and he was left in suspended isolation, forced to reckon with choices he had spent a lifetime avoiding. Back in Manhattan, Cassie returned to her hotel, but this time she did not feel the need to retreat. She stepped onto the balcony, overlooking the city she had once feared. Below, people moved about their lives, unaware of the quiet revolution that had just taken place in SDNY. And yet, the ripples were visible. in conversations, in hashtags, in whispered acknowledgments of courage. She allowed herself a rare smile, knowing that her struggle had transformed into something far larger than herself. The hotel's CCTV footage, once the subject of scrutiny and debate, became a case study for justice itself, a reminder that truth, when captured and presented without fear, has the power to topple the mightiest. Legal analysts dissected it, educators referenced it, survivors found hope in it. It was more than a video, it was evidence, it was vindication, it was legacy. For Diddy, every day was now a measure of consequence. The music industry reeled. Partners distanced themselves and fans grappled with the duality of admiration and revulsion. The empire he had built on glamour, influence, and intimidation had collapsed, leaving only a hollow echo of what once was. He was no longer the man who commanded rooms, red carpets, or headlines. He was a prisoner, a cautionary tale etched into the annals of celebrity history. In the quiet aftermath, Cassie met with advocates, lawyers, and survivors. She shared her story, offered counsel, and bore witness to the small victories that grew from the seeds of her struggle. Every smile, every tear, every acknowledgement reinforced the truth that courage, when paired with persistence, could change lives. And somewhere in a courtroom, in a hotel, in a city that never sleeps, her message traveled far beyond her voice. It became a movement, a declaration that truth would always matter more than power. As evening fell, Manhattan's skyline shimmered with lights reflecting off the East River. Cassie watched from a distance, feeling the weight of years lift from her shoulders. Justice had not come easily. It had required resilience, endurance, and faith in something larger than herself. But in the end, it had come. And for Diddy, in a stark cell behind locked doors, the lesson was irreversible. Influence has limits. Fame is fleeting, and no empire, no matter how vast, can stand against the undeniable force of truth. The city continued to hum around them, unaware and indifferent to the personal reckonings happening within its borders. Yet, for those who had witnessed, those who had suffered, and those who had persevered, the impact would linger forever. Justice had been served. Truth had triumphed. And in the quiet reflection of both streets and cells, the story of the fall of an icon and the rise of a survivor etched itself into history. Silence fell across both the courtroom and the city beyond. It was a silence heavy with consequence, heavy with relief, heavy with the understanding that life, in all its fragility and complexity, had finally balanced the scales. The legacy of that day, of that evidence, of that courage, would endure long after the cameras had gone, long after the headlines faded, and long after the empire had crumbled. Cassie walked forward into a world she had helped shape, carrying with her the weight of truth and the unshakable knowledge that justice, when pursued relentlessly, is unstoppable.